What's up, everyone? Welcome to Lowered Expectations. Thanks for lowering your expectations and hanging out with me here. I do appreciate it. In today's video, I have a box of stainless steel exhaust. There is 4 meters of exhaust tubing here, and I have a few extra pieces that came with my heater kits. So we are going to do some testing and find out, for one, how much heat you can scavenge from the exhaust, basically using exhaust tubing as a heat exchanger. And we are also going to find out how this actually affects the operation of the heater. We are going to start by adding different lengths of pipe and checking to see how much it changes the carbon monoxide output. And then we are actually going to put all of this onto the heater. We are going to run it on the max setting for several hours, and then we'll take it apart, take a look inside, and see how much soot or not soot that it created. At least for our primary testing, I want to give this the best possible chance at giving us good results. So what I'm going to do is straighten out all the tubing so that it doesn't have any kinks in it. That will give us the freest flow and should give us the best results. In order to get somewhat accurate results, we are first going to need a baseline. So what I'm going to do is fire up my 5 kilowatt heater. We are going to run it with this exhaust and with this inlet tube the whole time. And I'm also going to be running my heater in alpine mode. Ordinarily, I run my heater in normal mode, but I am at 3,500 feet. And as a result, it runs fairly rich, causing the heater to bounce off of the high threshold. What I mean by that is this heater has a fuel cut at 210 degrees Celsius, where it cuts the fuel level in about half until it cools down to 208. And because I assume the exhaust is probably going to cause some restriction and make us run rich, I'm going to deal with that, and we're going to set it in alpine mode for all of these tests, and hopefully that gives us more consistent results. As you guys can see, I've relocated the heater so that I can continue running the test with the pipes along the stretch without having to move the heater and chance changing any variables. So I'm going to now set the camera down and show you guys the carbon monoxide level. We will check the temperature of the heat exchanger, and then we'll add on our first meter of pipe, which I need to make a correction on. In the intro of this video, I actually made an error. These are not 1 meters in length. They are 1.2 meters, or 47 inches, somewhere around there. And so what I actually have in total with the new stainless exhaust is 4.8 meters, plus a couple of extra pieces. I do not recommend venting your heater inside of your garage, but as you guys will see shortly, the amount of carbon monoxide that this thing actually puts out the exhaust is extremely low when the heater is working properly. If it works improperly for any reason, you could end up dead in a hurry, so don't do it. I'm not sure if you guys can see this because of the glare, but the temperature on the heat exchanger is 184 Celsius, which is kind of exactly what I remember it being in the past. So now that it is fully up to temperature and stabilized, we are going to check the carbon monoxide. I've been checking the carbon monoxide at the exhaust for several minutes now, and the average seems to be somewhere around 12 parts per million. I actually think it's a little bit lower than that, but we'll go with 12 parts per million. And now we are going to add on an extra piece of exhaust. But before we do that, I'm actually going to get my thermocouple for my multimeter, and we are going to check the temperature of the exhaust, both where it comes into the exhaust and then where it exits here. I'm going to call it 270 Celsius in. I'm going to have to mark this down or I will forget. All right, temperature out 240 Celsius. Now what we need to do is install a couple of these things that I've made. It slides into the end of the exhaust just like that. The inside diameter here is actually a little bit larger than the port on the heater, and so that shouldn't cause any significant restriction. So now we're going to slide this in, put a couple of hose clamps on, and keep going. Alright, that's going to get hot in a hurry. I just set a 10-minute timer and we are going to come back and check up on this thing, but I have already noticed something that isn't terribly promising, and that is that the temperature has actually jumped up to 190 degrees Celsius. That very likely means that this 1.2 extra meters of pipe is causing a bit of restriction in airflow. That restriction in airflow is causing it to run a little bit rich, and therefore it is running a little bit hotter. However, we will come back and check the carbon monoxide as well as the temperature of the pipes in 10 minutes. 10 minutes has passed. My carbon monoxide meter is sitting outside and the temperature on the heater is currently 188 Celsius. Before we check the temperatures, I am going to check the carbon monoxide, and I can tell you already it has gone up, because as soon as I walk into the garage, well, it was showing 13 parts per million. Now it's blinking back and forth, but let's actually check it at the exhaust. I've been checking the carbon monoxide output at the first part of our exhaust extension, so an extra 1.2 meters of exhaust added. And it is varying anywhere from between 15 to 19, and it seems that the average is probably about 17. So we're going to call it 17 and move on to checking the temperatures. I'm not sure if you guys will care about this at all, but the temperature going into the second pipe has actually risen slightly. So it was about 238, 239. I wrote down 240 on the piece of cardboard. But we will check it again. It has now gone up to 245 Celsius, which is about 473 Fahrenheit. That seems like a pretty substantial drop in temperature over this 1.2 meters. We have 160 Celsius, which is 320 Fahrenheit. Let's mark that down. It is just a few seconds later, and once again the temperature is up to 190. I was going to say I'm kind of surprised it's not climbing higher, but I just saw 192. Anyway, we will monitor this. I'm going to set another 10-minute timer and we'll see what happens. Just for giggles, and I suppose for my own safety, I decided to check the carbon monoxide output before the heater actually settles down, and I was pretty surprised. It was reading 30 parts per million. It seems as though once the pipe heats up, it comes down a bit. We might be in for around 30 parts per million, but we'll come back in 10 minutes and find out for sure. It is actually a little over 20 minutes later, and the temperature of the heat exchanger has settled at 190 Celsius. When I came out here, it was actually at 186, so it has been fluctuating a little bit. Now let's go check the carbon monoxide. This is only 2 extra pieces, which is 2.4 meters of extra exhaust tubing. I can't imagine what it's going to be like once we get all 4 pieces on. Anyway, let's check this and see what it says. The last time it was 17 parts per million. I was expecting this to be much higher, especially after our initial test where it was 30 parts per million. It is actually staying pretty steady at 18 parts per million. The highest that I've seen is 19. I am surprised and impressed. This is a good sign. I'm also very curious as to what's going to happen when we shut the heater down and try to restart it. That could be quite interesting. So 151 Celsius, 304 Fahrenheit, 151 C. 151 C. That is very interesting. The temperature actually dropped on this one. It's staying right around 100 Celsius, which is 212 Fahrenheit. I have now added another 1.2 meters of exhaust pipe, which means we are now up to 3.6 meters on top of the original pipe. We have one 90-degree bend in it, and I'm gonna check the carbon monoxide here. I just got the piece installed, and I think the level is gonna be high and then maybe drop. We are gonna set another 10-minute timer, 36, 37, 38, 39. As you guys can see, when a new length of pipe is first added, the temperature goes up on the heat exchanger, and the carbon monoxide also goes up, but it seems to kind of settle down once everything gets up to temperature. So it'll be interesting to see. That makes me think that I need to do another test and actually cool off the exhaust. I don't know what is actually causing this. It could be that once the air heats up enough inside of the pipe, it moves more freely. And because it's moving more freely, it doesn't cause as much restriction, so it doesn't run as rich. So if we cool off the pipe, which is really what we want to do, we want to get the heat out of it. So if we cool off the pipe, is it going to cause the carbon monoxide level to spike? I'm not sure how I'm going to test that. I might have to move the whole unit outside. If you are interested in purchasing your very own heat exchanger or perhaps burn chamber, I have great news for you. Viver doesn't sell parts, but they sell these diesel heaters at such a great price that you're better off just buying the whole thing. There will be affiliate links as well as a discount code in the description below. Go check it out. This is a good sign. After 20 minutes with the door closed in the garage, I come out here and it is 0 parts per million. I'm sure it's more than that at the tip of the exhaust, but the overall air volume of the garage is reading 0. The temperature on here is a little bit more concerning, not because of the temperature itself, but because it is now up to 196 Celsius. It was 194. So I'm going to mark that down as 194, and then we are going to check the carbon monoxide and see what it's doing at the end of the pipe. I've now been checking this for a few minutes and it has settled around 30 parts per million. I've seen as high as 31 and as low as 29, so it's pretty consistent. We are going to call this 30 parts per million. Then we'll check the temperatures and add the last piece. Let's see what the temperature has gone to here. I think it was 100 Celsius. The temperature going into the third piece of exhaust seems to have settled around 95 Celsius, which is 203 Fahrenheit, so we'll mark that down. We are steady at 60 degrees Celsius, which is 140 Fahrenheit. That is the answer on how to quiet your exhaust, folks. 4.8 meters of exhaust. Job done. After adding that last piece of exhaust, we are up to 198 Celsius on the exchanger. We are going to set another 10-minute timer and see what happens. But first, let's check the carbon monoxide and see if it has spiked like it has with the other ones. We are up to 30 immediately, 34, 35, 37, 40, 41, 42. Another 20 minutes has passed and I'm not sure where we're going to go from this, but we are at 0 parts per million as I am standing at the door. Let's go down to the end of the exhaust and see all of the stuff that we've been checking. carbon monoxide temperature in and out, and also before we go down there, I guess we will check the temperature of the exchanger. It is at 200 Celsius. Try to give you guys a shot of this. I've been checking the exhaust for a few minutes now, and it seems to be around 42 parts per million, which is still pretty reasonable. All right, we are still at 60 Celsius, 140 Fahrenheit. Way down here at the outlet, we are, I'm gonna say 40. I'm gonna say 38 Celsius. Okay, there's 40. Should have stuck with my original guess. 42, 43. It has settled out at 45 Celsius, which is 113 Fahrenheit. Let's see if we can get a reading on the actual air temperature coming out. I think it's going to be substantially more. So the air temperature coming out seems to have settled at 56 Celsius, which is 133 Fahrenheit. What that means is that we are capturing a lot of heat energy out of this exhaust using the exhaust pipe itself as a heat exchanger. But what it also means is that we could capture more. Ideally, you would want the exhaust coming out basically at room temperature, which is 17 degrees Celsius. So we could still capture considerably more heat energy out of this exhaust and make it even more efficient. That being said, that's not going to be done in this video. What we are going to continue on with in this video is actually leaving it run like this for several hours. I'm going to burn at least a gallon of fuel through this. Then we're going to tear it apart, look inside, and see what the results are. It is now the following day. I shut the heater down at about 7 a.m. At that time, it had burnt about 1.5 gallons of fuel. And we are now going to restart it just to see what happens, because I'm curious. Every time we added a piece of pipe yesterday, it acted up a little bit, and then the CO2 level would kind of come back down to normal. So I'm kind of curious. It might struggle to start, or it might refuse to start at all. It might make a big cloud of smoke. It is pretty difficult to get this ridiculous contraption all in one shot. The heater is way over here, and the exhaust will be coming out over here. So hopefully if there's smoke coming out, we can see it. You obviously won't be able to see the controller down there, but I'm now going to take the journey all the way to the heater and fire it up. I just heard the pump start, and we can see smoke coming out. All right. That's a considerable amount of smoke. That is a lot more than normal. Okie dokie. Yeah, that's not ideal. Not ideal. Okay, it seems to have cleared up. That's good. I'm gonna open this window. Yeah, very quickly going up there. Seems to be struggling to get up to temperature. It might flame out. All right, that is not insane now. That is actually pretty reasonable. It has finally made it through the startup sequence. You can hear it slowing down. If I wasn't talking, you could hear it slowing down. So I'm now going to speed it back up to setting 6. I get a lot of people commenting on my old videos saying that pointing the exhaust in any way but straight down is going to cause the condensate to build up inside of the exhaust and cause a problem. And my response to that has always been that my exhaust is too short, too hot, and the fact that it's indoors means that it's not going to build up condensation. You have to have, it has to cool off in order for that to actually happen. So we are gonna do some tests eventually where this heater is actually sitting outside with the exhaust pointing straight up, and we are gonna see if we can get it to just totally fill up with water and cause the heater to shut down. I'm fairly certain that we can make that happen. It's just a question of how long the exhaust needs to be. We do have 4.8 meters, so I'm sure we can make it happen. With the exhaust inside of my garage running all night, there was no condensate built up inside of the pipe. There was nothing dripping out the end. Even on startup with the pipe fairly cold, I can see steam coming out the end, but there's no water actually dripping. So the colder the outside of the pipe is kept, the more condensate will actually form on the pipe itself. And so placing the heater outside to do that test would be ideal. I expected the next clip to be me with the heater apart, showing you guys that it was actually pretty clean inside, but I found something kind of interesting along the way. And that has to do with these little adapters that I made to fit the pipes together. What you're looking at here is the first one in line. So the exhaust pipe that was actually connected to the heater was already a straw color from previous tests. You can see most of it is a straw color, and then at the bend there you can see it's kind of more of a purplish or somewhat orangey color. The little coupler or joiner that holds the exhaust together, so this held onto the original piece of exhaust. You can see it is quite purpley blue, the oxide on there. So that was getting quite hot. This is the second coupler, and it might have a bit of a straw color to it, but I'm not detecting any oxidation color to it whatsoever. It starts to get a bit interesting again on the third piece that has a little bit of iron oxide or rust oxide inside of the pipe, and I'm guessing the camera will not be able to pick up on that at all. But what you will be able to see is the iron oxide inside of the last piece of pipe. And what was happening here is that the water was actually able to condensate enough inside of this coupler that it was forming water droplets, and that was causing it to, causing it to rust. I've spared you guys the disassembly process. If you've watched my channel for any length of time, you've probably seen this hundreds of times. The glow plug had a little bit of wetness around the threaded area, but that's just because we're running the heater upside down or standing on end, which is to be expected. Fortunately, it did seal around the tapered edge of the glow plug, so no diesel actually ran out. Let's pull the burn tube out now, or the burn chamber out of the heat exchanger, and take a look. This is my first time looking in here. We are now going to take a look inside of the burn chamber with the Viver inspection camera. Not sure if you guys can see that, but there is some oxide on the side of the chamber. That is not carbon, that's just an oxide. And that's probably mostly due to the fact that this is a cheap burn chamber. You can see at the left, let's see, bottom left corner on that little gear looking thing, there is some carbon or soot buildup just a little bit. The mesh looks perfectly clean, the baffle is clean, but down along the very bottom you can see there is a little bit of carbon buildup. That is where the diesel is very likely pooling during the burn. I'm running the heater with this side sitting down. So what we were just looking at is the bottom surface here where the diesel is actually pooling and burning off. So not surprising. I don't know that that would ever become an issue, but we would have to run it for a couple of 100 hours to actually know that, and that's not what this video is about. Wow, this is clean though. If this is the only video of mine that you've seen, you might not be aware that I have done a bunch of waste motor oil burning experiments with this heater, and so it had a bunch of crud built up in it. And each time I use it, I've burned it with paint thinner and Varisol and diesel. And every time I run it on a clean fuel, the burn chamber gets a little cleaner. Yeah, it's actually cleaner now than when I put it back together. Quite honestly, I'm not sure how to conclude this video. We were able to use this extra 4.8 meters of exhaust tubing without any substantial issues. That being said, we did see quite a bit of smoke on startup, and if you were to start your heater quite frequently and not run it very long, that could become a problem. We ended up burning about 1.5 gallons of fuel, so this is not a long-term test by any means, but based on the previous tests that I have done and based on the results that I see here, I'm pretty confident that you could actually do this in the long term without any serious issues. Of course, you would want to be venting the exhaust outside and you would want to be sloping it down so that you didn't have a buildup of condensate inside of the tube. We didn't end up with any carbon buildup whatsoever inside of these exhaust tubes. The heat exchanger was very clean, as well as the burn chamber, so that is all very positive. It turns out that this is a pretty cost-effective heat exchanger if you have room to lay tubing end to end. It ended up costing me about $80 Canadian on Amazon, and like I say, you could just run this end to end and the numbers don't lie. The temperature going into the first pipe was 270 Celsius, or at the heater is 270 Celsius, and the temperature coming out was 45. So we were able to capture a whole lot of energy. Can we do better? Yes, we are going to start by coiling this stuff up, seeing how much of a restriction that causes, and actually seeing how much more energy we can capture just by coiling this stuff and running it in a slightly different way. Then we're going to take things to a little bit different level and actually run this through a bucket of water, maybe sand. You guys let me know what you want to see in the comments. That is going to do it for this one. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.